Hey, it's another edition of the DLF Dynasty podcast with me, Dan Myler, and that guy over there, Ryan McDowell. Ryan, it's just a two-man crew this week, just me and you. Matt's off on assignment somewhere. I guess he's looking at something to do with Star Wars. We got some text messages. That guy has the life.
Yeah, who knows what's going on with him? We'll miss him on this one, but Dan, man, I feel like every week we get on here and we complain about bad football or
Okay.
blowout games or injuries or poor fantasy performances or whatever. I don't know. Maybe it has to do with Matt not being here. This was the best Sunday of the year for me. Great games, great performances. Wow, what a day!
I like
it.
how you tied that all back together. It's all Matt's fault. He likes to blame me for Jamar Chase. Kind of slumping a little bit. It was a big week of scoring. All my leagues, we're seeing record-setting performances.
Yeah.
Not only with fantasy football teams, but individual players even having the biggest games of their careers, fantasy-wise at least. And that turned into big scores. I think there's going to be a lot of people kicking themselves for playing the wrong guy, maybe. But overall, it was, like you said, really good football. That all started out on Thursday night, but that wasn't the good football. That was pretty bad.
It was an appetizer.
The Cowboys, a poor appetizer, a really bad one. Some rotten broccoli or something got served as the appetizer. Cowboys win 27-17. CeeDee Lamb was good, 7 for 89 on 13 targets. Tony Pollard busted that big one. Outside of that, not a lot to get excited about. I'd say the only thing that I really caught my eye, Ryan, was Michael Gallup. That touchdown catch in the corner, was sweet. And it seems like since he came back, especially from injury, and they've been missing some other receivers. Of course, Cooper was back in this one, played, I think, limited snaps, but he was on the field. He's made a few of these plays where you think to yourself, wow, this guy's a free agent. Is he good enough to be a wide receiver 1 for an NFL team and for that to turn into a wide receiver 2 for our fantasy teams, or is he a step below that, Ryan?
I feel like he's probably a step below that. And there's a pretty long history of teams, wide receiver 2s or even 3s on their team leaving via free agency. With just that in mind. Obviously, I'm sure the player has that in mind, but that's what fantasy managers think. If we could just get this guy in a different situation, he would really blow up. And most often that doesn't really happen. They don't take that new role and run with it. So I don't know that Gallup is going to go anywhere else and be a locked in wide receiver 1 for that team. But I do think he can do exactly what he's done for Dallas. With a larger workload. And that's certainly good news for fantasy managers.
I think of a guy like him going to the other team in this game, maybe going to New Orleans and getting a role where you'd really prefer him not to get that type of role where he's supposed to be the number 1 as he would be this year. If Michael Thomas is back, he's able to blend in there. There's a handful of other landing spots potentially as well, but no matter where he goes, it seems like he's going to get a big payday and they're going to be relying on him to get targets. It seems like his dynasty value is going to go up this offseason no matter where he lands.
Definitely. And that volume that I mentioned, like you said, regardless of where he goes, we're going to expect more snaps, more targets, and more production chasing that. So, yeah, the value is definitely going to go up, like you said, regardless of where he lands. Or where he's expected to land. Really, that pre-free agency time, from the end of the Super Bowl until free agency actually kicks off, we've got usually around 6 or 8 weeks, I guess, something like that. That's the time when you're probably going to have a buy window. I'm sorry, a sell window on Michael Gallup if you don't believe in him. We're going to see him traded a lot in that time span.
Yeah, we are. And hopefully we see the big production spike too. But like you mentioned, there's so many receivers that come up as a second or third tier guy in their offense and make big plays like Gallup has done throughout his 4-year career in Dallas. And then we have higher expectations and they kind of fade away. Hopefully that's not the case with Gallup. We'll see what happens in free agency. We also need to see what's happening in this backfield in Dallas, because I mentioned the big gain by Tony Pollard, long touchdown run down the left sideline, but just 7 carries, turned it into 71 yards and a touchdown. Zeke, meanwhile, 13 carries for 45. A couple of those, I think, were on like their last drive. It was kind of odd to even see him on the field, and he busts off a 12-yard run, something like that. Pretty disappointing game overall. And passing the eye test, Ryan, Zeke just doesn't look as explosive, as powerful as he usually does, or at least what he looked like earlier in the season.
For sure. And of course, leading up to that game or immediately after that Thanksgiving game, we heard reports that maybe they would rest Zeke. And we even talked about that on last week's show, referring to load management that we see in the NBA. And then Dallas really went through it leading up to that game with COVID kind of running through that clubhouse and lots of stuff going on. So we end up seeing Zeke active. I'm not sure he really should have been. He definitely, as you said, didn't look fully healthy. And this is kind of what we saw last year. We were going through the same things, suggesting that Tony Pollard was the better back, the more capable back. Certainly looks more healthy at this point. I actually saw a poll. I think it was, I believe it was our buddy Izzy, put a poll on Twitter, just straight up, who do you want in Dynasty? And Tony Pollard was winning that poll. Now, say what you want about Twitter polls, who knows, and how people really feel or how they would value those backs if they were on their specific Dynasty team. But just that it was close really tells us kind of where Zeke's value is right now. In the past 7 games, this is the reality. He has one RB1 game in the past 7 games. That's it. And this is a player that we drafted in the first round of seasonal leagues. This is a player that certainly has had a high value both in trade and drafts in recent years. Maybe this is the beginning of the end for Zeke.
Yeah, maybe. I feel like we've already read this chapter of the book a little bit. You outlined it there from last season. It looks like a banged up running back, a guy that has taken a lot of shots throughout his career. And now in this season, he looked healthy and spry early in the season. Throughout those Hard Knocks episodes, we were watching him, and he looked electric during those episodes. So I still believe that it's there. I think he's just dinged up. We'll see what happens down the stretch. Their schedule gets kind of nice here in the next few weeks. They get Washington a couple times. They got to play the Giants as well. They end the season with the Cardinals, then the Eagles. So we'll see what happens. They get this, they always call it the mini bye. I kind of hate that term, but the 10 days off after going from a Thursday night to a Sunday. I expect Zeke to stay on the field. If he was going to play on this Thursday night game, I'd expect him to be active again next week at Washington. We probably can't glaze over the Taysom Hill performance, if you can call it that. 264 yards and 2 touchdowns. Passing sounds great, and 100 yards rushing sounds like, wow, that's awesome. But 4 interceptions, should have for sure thrown a 5th, probably could have thrown a 6th as well. Does not look like a passer. He's like a poor man's Jalen Hurts to me, Ryan. It was ugly watching Taysom Hill try to play quarterback on Thursday night.
It really was. The end box score looks pretty good from a fantasy standpoint. But yeah, it was a rough road to get there, including those, I believe it was 4 interceptions. Yeah. So, I mean, he's not the future of that team, regardless of what his contract might say. It's just kind of what they've been left with this season. It's been an ugly one.
The thing is, we all trust that coach there, and he keeps giving them these contracts. Sean Payton is widely regarded as an offensive mind and, creative and all the things that we want as fantasy players. And they keep giving him the money. And not every time we see him get the opportunity, we kind of shake our heads. So I agree with you. He doesn't seem like an NFL quarterback, and it's nice to have that jack of all trades available. But man, that was brutal watching that football game on Thursday night. Yeah. The Buccaneers, they beat the Falcons on Sunday, 30-17. All the usual suspects came through for us. Tom Brady, 368 and 4. Godwin caught 15 passes for 143 yards. So he was awesome in PPR leagues. And Gronk caught 2 touchdowns. if you had a Buccaneer that you would regularly start and you put him in your lineup, you're pretty jacked.
Yeah, this is just what we saw last year as they began their Super Bowl run. And who knows if it'll play out that way again. It doesn't really matter from a fantasy standpoint. They're producing now. Everybody's back healthy with Gronk now 2 or 3 weeks removed from his injury. It's all systems go. All of these guys are starters every single week. Brady, obviously, Godwin, Gronk, Mike Evans, Leonard Fournette, start them all.
Gronk has top 3 tight end upside the rest of the way. For the Falcons, Cordero Patterson get close to 100 yards from scrimmage. Ryan looked pretty good. Could have probably scored on one, got pulled off the field, and then Mike Davis has the seize part for a long touchdown run. What are your thoughts on Patterson? He's coming off this injury. He's played now a couple weeks and looked pretty good.
It just seems like they're using him a little bit differently than earlier in the season. He's transitioned more to that lead back role, thanks to Davis's struggles. But fantasy-wise, I'm not sure that's a good thing. Patterson saw more than 5 targets 4 times in the first 5 games. And that's only happened once now in the past 6 games. That he has drawn more than 5 targets. So that's really where we were seeing his upside is in that passing game, getting 6, 7, 8, 9 targets in a game, including the majority of those, including for some touchdowns earlier in the season. And now that he's just a better version of Mike Davis now, basically with a few targets each game and mostly focused on running the ball.
It's kind of painful because you expect him to do what he did earlier in the year, and all of a sudden he's flexed into the slot and they run the whip route to him, get him a couple blocks, and he turns that into a first down and a big play potentially. And we're not seeing those types of opportunities. Just 3 catches on Sunday against Tampa Bay, despite them playing from behind for a majority of the game, is kind of frustrating after spending a 2nd-round pick to add him to a contender. How about Kyle Pitts, another guy we're watching all the time? 4 catches, 48 yards on 7 targets. Defenses are trying to stop Kyle Pitts because that's what they have. That's Cordero Patterson and Kyle Pitts. So what are we thinking about Pitts? Now that Matt is not with us, we can have a real conversation.
Yeah, we can speak freely now.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just wondering about Kyle Pitts' value because this type of game, 4 catches, 48 yards, it's kind of become the norm for Pitts. 1 touchdown on the season. That's it. He certainly flashed that upside, and I don't say any of this to suggest we should be giving up on Pitts or that he's not a guy you want on your team. I definitely still have high expectations for him long-term. Still my Dynasty tight end 1 easily. But when I look at our new ADP, we've got December ADP in the works. It's not out on the site yet, but we've made some good progress on it. And for the 2nd month in a row, I believe, maybe even the 3rd month in a row, Kyle Pitts is a 1st-rounder in our startup ADP. He's going right between Tyreek Hill and Alvin Kamara. And that's just where I start to ask myself if he's being overvalued as a 1st-rounder coming off in the middle of his rookie tight end season.
Yeah, well, we all saw that 2-game stretch in weeks 5 and 7 surrounding their bye when he had like 180 yards or 280 yards over those 2 games and caught the long touchdown and, had 8 and 10 catches in those 2 games. And since then, he hasn't had over 62 yards and hasn't found pay dirt. And, you mentioned the ADP, and the rise has been kind of unbelievable, really. Around NFL draft time, he was about 37 in ADP. By July, he was 29. Then in August, 28. September, 23. October, 19. And now, as you mentioned, all the way up there in the 1st round. So I think that goes to speak to how many people listen to Dynasty analysts that talk a lot about the upside of these rookies. And, if you constantly pound on people that Kyle Pitts is the next big thing, and he has those kind of performances inside his rookie season, that value is going to spike really, really fast. And that's all we're seeing here. It might have gotten out ahead of itself just a little bit, though. How about the Cardinals and the Bears? Arizona wins this one 33-22. Kyler Murray, Ryan, was awesome. Just 123 passing yards, but 2 touchdowns passing, 2 rushing to go along with 59 rushing yards. That is vintage Kyler Murray.
Yeah, good to see Murray back on the field. We had certainly missed him. The Cardinals had missed him as well. Prior to that injury, though, and prior to missing multiple games, one thing that I had noticed, and plenty of others had as well, I know, is the way they had used Kyler Murray in the running game. Basically, he had not been running the ball, and that's one reason why we had valued him so highly entering this season. We had seen that upside that he could offer as a ball carrier, but it just wasn't there in those first several games prior to that injury. In this one, though, 10 carries, 59 yards, 2 touchdowns, all season highs. He only had 3 rushing touchdowns on the season entering this game, and those actually came the first 3 weeks of the season. So he had not had a rushing touchdown since week 3, and now adds 2 more scores to that. Obviously, very good news for Kyler Murray managers, and I think it's good news for the Cardinals too.
Yeah, good news for DeAndre Hopkins managers as well. He catches just 2 balls for 32 yards, but the 20-yard touchdown, they didn't have to throw the ball much in this football game. In fact, Kyler Murray only completed 11 passes. They were turning it around and either handing it to James Conner or running Kyler Murray. Conner ends up with 75 rushing yards on 20 carries, 2 catches for 36 and a touchdown. That was a nice grab, by the way. And it makes me think, Ryan, about James Conner's dynasty value. Currently the RB 42. He's right around guys like Myles Gaskin and Melvin Gordon, Chuba Hubbard and Kenneth Gainwell, also Devin Singletary and Nyheim Hines. Like, one of these names doesn't belong, at least according to production on the field. Now, it's kind of odd because James Conner's contract is up, and he only signed that 1-year contract. Chase Edmonds, who's about to return from injury as well, he's on the final year of his contract. My gut tells me, Ryan, that they're going to want to bring James Conner back before they bring back Chase Edmonds. So it feels like there might be the potential for Conner to have a little bit more long-term value, and that his dynasty value will in turn move up in the coming months.
I totally agree. And even with this production that we've seen, especially touchdown production, we haven't seen his value increase all that much, almost similar to Cordarrelle Patterson, who we talked about earlier. Conner seems like a guy that if you found the right match in your league, a non-contender has Conner, you could buy him for a second throughout most of this season, even though he's been playing so well and producing. I do agree with you, especially if he ends up staying in Arizona. I think we see the value kind of catch up this offseason, and he moves back in that, I'd say 6th, 7th round range of startup ADP.
Yeah, I wonder if there's going to be an opportunity before free agency hits, if he hasn't signed quite yet, after the Super Bowl, while dynasty managers are trying to pull off those deals. Before he re-signs a contract, if you're going to be able to get your hands on him. His ADP dipped as low as 163. That was in September, in season, and now has jumped back up to about 125. So we'll see what happens in the coming months. Feels like there's some value with Conner coming up here in the coming year or months. He's only 26 years old, so it's not like we're talking about a 30-year-old running back here. Mm-hmm. The Chargers jumped out to a big lead. Bengals come back. Chargers pull away. They end up winning 41-22. Justin Herbert had one of his games, but didn't run the football once again. That was disappointing to see. Threw 3 touchdowns, went over 300 yards. That's nice to see. Keenan Allen, 5 for 34 and 2 touchdowns. Mike Williams had a 100-yard game, Ryan. So I guess, the big play to Mike Williams, he almost scores. If that's a touchdown, we're all thrilled. I'm pretty happy with 5 for 110, though.
Well, you have to be after the past few games, really the past almost 2 months worth of games for Mike Williams. He started the season so well. He did have 4 catches for 92 yards in the first quarter and then ends the game 5 for 110. So
that's such a Mike Williams stat.
Yeah, it felt like it could have been even bigger. The Chargers have won they've won 7 games this season now. In 5 of those, Mike Williams was the top 20 fantasy wide receiver. They have lost 5 games, and he was the top 20 wide receiver in just one of those. So it almost feels like, as Mike Williams goes and as his production goes, so go the Chargers. You would think that they would see that as well, but who knows what's going to happen? And this coaching staff, I think, started out as kind of the darlings of the NFL fan base, especially the analytics believers, as they're going for it on 4th down and they're going for 2, and a lot of the things that we typically want to see more of. But then, I don't know, mid-season, it feels like things changed. Mike Williams, the first 5 weeks, wide receiver 14, wide receiver 10, wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, and then a very cold stretch since then, 73, 78, 46, 45, 50, and now we've got a wide receiver 10, wide receiver 20 game. So when Williams produces, the Chargers win.
Yeah, he certainly has been up and down, and that ADP has been up and down. I'd like to do a study. I wonder if anybody jumped like he did. In September, he had an ADP of 113. The following month, all the way up to 43, and that's settled back into 53 now. But certainly a wide receiver that's 27 years old rarely jumps up 70 spots in ADP in 1 month, even in season. So he's showed his upside, showed that ceiling a couple of times this year, but he's also showed us some stinkers. And you mentioned the finishes among wide receivers. Man, it's frustrating. Austin Eckler was pretty good in this game as well. 14 for 59 on the ground, scored a touchdown, caught 5 passes for 45. For the Bengals, Joe Mixon messed up his pinky, still threw for 300 yards, had a rushing and passing touchdown. Joe Mixon, clearly the Chargers were trying to slow him down. 19 carries for just 54 yards, but found the end zone to save his day. T. Higgins, Ryan, another nice game. 9 catches, 138 yards, and a touchdown, and had that big catch over the middle for the score, leaped over the defender, had a safety coming over the top. That was an impressive play. Last week, 6 for 114 in a score on 8 targets against Pittsburgh. So he's kind of had a little bit of a resurgence here.
Yeah, he needed it. His value was going in the wrong direction. And of course, with big games for T. Higgins or for Tyler Boyd, that's a negative for Jamar Chase. Chase just 5 catches for 52 yards, had that kind of that fluky, bobbling attempt at a catch that was intercepted, had another bad drop later in the game. Again, just like we said with Pitts, this is not a long-term concern. But when Jamar Chase moves all the way to the number 1 overall spot in our ADP, which is what he did in November, it's just a reminder to slow down. I still think he's a first rounder in dynasty startups, but we were probably getting a little too aggressive at that point. Myself,
a little too aggressive. It was hard not to fall in love with the big plays week in and week out and all the big catches. They have other weapons on this team. Joe Mixon is a stud running back. They got to get the football to Higgins and Tyler Boyd. And, there's just too many mouths to feed for Chase to continue to put up those kind of numbers week in and week out. He's going to have some down games, and he's going to drop a pass and tip it up in the air, and defender gets an interception. That was a theme of Sunday as well. That happened at least 3 times, and a couple of them for touchdowns, I think. Lions fans, congratulations. Got that dub. That was nice. I was with you all day. The Packers weren't on. I'm a Packers fan, of course. I live in Vikings territory, so I said, why not strap on that Lions helmet and become a Lions fan for the afternoon? They came through 29-27. Amon-Ra, St. Brown, big touchdown catch at the end of the game. The Vikings played horrible defense. They drop back. They're standing in the end zone already, and then they take 3 steps back, and St. Brown just runs to the goal line and catches it. It was ridiculous. 10 catches, 86, and a score. His biggest game so far as a pro, Ryan, and St. Brown, that's his first touchdown. He's on a pretty nice pace. 49 catches, 438 yards, and a touchdown so far as a rookie. I wrote the rookie report card last week about Amon-Ra St. Brown and how I was kind of down on him throughout draft season. Coming out of USC, he had made a lot of big plays for USC, and he just didn't profile as that kind of player at the next level. Well, the Lions aren't using him as that kind of player. He's a traditional slot guy trying to run those whip routes, get underneath, a little bit of run after the catch. He's not super athletic. He's not going to make huge plays. I think I said at the end of the article that his ultimate upside is Hunter Renfrow. And Hunter Renfrow is performing at his ultimate upside right now. I guess I kind of tilt towards him just being a guy, but Sunday was, if that's any indication, he was used early and often. Late in that game, he was regularly depended on to get open and get out of bounds, and he turned in a nice game.
Well, this is kind of what we thought we would see from Amon-Ra St. Brown and really from the entire Lions offense entering the season. We expected them to be trailing for most of the game, for most of the season, and that would lead to a lot of Jared Goff pass attempts. That's what we saw in this one. You look at that wide receiver core, and it's shuffled around so much throughout the year or since the beginning of the year, but St. Brown has kind of been the constant there. But you look at that and think he's probably the most talented guy of that, and that's not saying much. We understand that, but it felt like these types of games could have or should have been happening all along this season. So it's good to see him finally produce. I agree with you. I still don't have a lot of long-term expectations or hope for him, but it was good to see this one. Season highs and career highs with those receptions, yardage, and as you said, his first career touchdown.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised with his performance. And as you said, probably the most talented guy in that receiving core. It's hard to add multiple wide receivers in an offseason. So I would say it's likely that he's the preferred slot next season. So maybe he can build on this going into next year. Josh Reynolds, the newest wide receiver for the Lions, had a really nice first half, 4 catches for 69 yards on 7 targets in the game. TJ Hawkinson caught the touchdown, probably should have had another one in the game. And Jamal Williams, 17 carries, 71 yards, just 1 catch. I think we expected more with the role there, but he was bottled up by that Vikings defense. For the Vikes, Kirk Cousins goes for 340 and 2 touchdowns. Justin Jefferson was incredible after the Thielen injury, 11 for 182 and 1 on 14 targets. I don't know what everything kind of happened as it should have, except Thielen got hurt. Madison put up a big performance. Tyler Conklin got into it with 7 for 56, caught a touchdown that got taken away. I don't know. What is there to take away here for the Vikes?
Well, the Thielen injury, the Vikings play next week on Thursday.
Oh, yeah.
It's an ankle injury. So although Thielen was not ruled out necessarily very quickly, he kept that questionable tag into the second half before they ultimately ruled him out. It didn't seem like he was ever close to returning. So if you've got Adam Thielen, I would not count on him for next week. And I know for many leagues, next week is the final week of the regular season. So that's going to be a big one for sure. Alexander Mattison, I looked at, and we all looked at his production without Dalvin Cook in the lineup. We talked about that last week as well, I believe. He averaged, coming into this week, he averaged 21.2 fantasy points per game when Dalvin Cook was out of the lineup. That 4 total games. In this one, he scores 21.4 fantasy points. So just nearly spot on what you would expect. A good, solid performance from Madison. And if Cook's not out there, start Madison every single time. No question.
Yeah, he looked good doing it too. He had a couple runs where he hit the second level and made a linebacker or a safety miss for extra yardage. I think he looks like Dalvin Cook -1, just a very small step below Dalvin Cook, whoever's getting the workload there. You mentioned that the Vikings play on Thursday night. That is against Pittsburgh's tough defense. I don't know, with Thielen out, KJ Osborne, maybe he gets a shot. He caught a touchdown on Sunday, 4 for 47. So maybe he's an outside flex consideration with no Thielen. The Colts, they blanked the Texans 31-0, and there's nothing else to say other than Jonathan Taylor. 31 carries, 143 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Didn't catch a pass. Felt very Derrick Henry-esque, that ball game that he put on film against the Texans. For Houston, like what is there here? That there's nothing. The offense didn't do a thing. If you started anybody, it's your own fault because you shouldn't have.
Well, I mean, it's kind of been the theme of the year that you can't start any Texans other than Brandon Cooks. Even he disappointed in.
I sat him in 2 out of the 3 leagues that I have him. So, I didn't have a choice in the other one. So I shouldn't have said that probably. It's if you had to start him, obviously you do it. But he had a carry for 16 yards and caught 3 for 38. That's not helping you win.
Yeah, we saw the upside with Brandon Cooks earlier in the year. He started the season with 3 straight games as a wide receiver 2, as a top 24 fantasy wide receiver. Since week 3, he's only had 4 of those games total. So it's kind of the up and down, hot and cold Brandon Cooks, and I mean it's clearly not his fault. We saw a stretch of Davis Mills when Tyrod Taylor was injured. Through a big stretch of the season, and in this one, Tyrod Taylor was benched, and Mills came in to replace him. I don't know that it even matters who starts next week or really the remainder of the season for Houston. You watch a game like this, and you just wonder how they even won those 2 games that they did.
Yeah, I cut Davis Mills in a couple super flex leagues this week to make room for salary cap or whatever reason, because it just doesn't look like it's there with him.
No.
If I were the Texans, though, with all that said, I would start Davis Mills, because you got to know for sure before next year's off season before deciding what you're going to do there. The last note from this game, Carson Wentz, 158 yards and a touchdown, Ryan. His pace, it was red hot earlier this season. There was a stretch of about 6 games where he had multiple touchdown games. He had rushing yards to go with it and had a few rushing touchdowns as well. And that's simmered here recently. That probably coincides with Jonathan Taylor getting 30 carries in a game, the defense playing better, the offensive line, their run blocking is probably the best in the league, opening up holes for whoever's back there. Defenses are forced now to come up and try to play JT. I'm wondering if down the stretch that'll turn into that play action game. Wentz will become more effective down the field, but just the 1 touchdown pass, wasn't asked to throw the football all that much on Sunday. This is kind of an expectation moving forward for Wentz with Taylor rolling like he is.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is. And you're right. In the middle of the season, we had a 5-game stretch where Carson Wentz was a top 14 quarterback in all 5 games. That's only happened 1 time over the past month now.
Let me guess, Tampa Bay, when they were playing that shootout.
It was Tampa Bay. Yeah, Tampa Bay, week 12. Wentz was the quarterback 7. Other than that, he's been much further down the scoring list. And that's the game they want to play. At this point, they want to rely on Jonathan Taylor. They are playing stronger defense. They've got their offensive line back fully healthy, I believe. So this is what they want. So I don't know if we can really use Carson Wentz in lineups moving forward in unless you have to, I guess that's always the caveat.
Yeah, it's going to be, especially in single quarterback, you're probably not looking his way unless it looks like a game where it's going to be a shootout, maybe a Tampa Bay type game, but they don't have a lot of those scheduled. Guys, we're sponsored by Monkey Knife Fight, the fastest growing daily fantasy site in the world. Instead of spending your time building elaborate salary cap rosters or competing against professional players, you can explore unique, fun, easy to play games like More or Less, Knockout Kings, Eagle Eye, Goal Rush, or Touchdown Dance. Play any of the major sports such as the NFL, NBA, NHL, and MLB, as well as UFC, NASCAR, golf, soccer, and various college sports without competing against all those sharks. Right now, you can open a new Monkey Knife Fight account, make an initial deposit, and get a full year of DLF Premium for free. On top of that, if you use the promo code DLF, Monkey Knife Fight is going to match your deposit 100% doubling your initial funds. Simply log on to dynastyleaguefootball.com, click the image for Monkey Knife Fight, and follow the instructions to join me and Ryan playing these games today. Let's talk about the Giants and the Dolphins. Miami won that one 20-9. Tua Tagovailoa, 244 and 2 touchdowns. But we're going to talk about him every week, Ryan. Jaylen Waddle is on the express to becoming a wide receiver 1 for dynasty managers. Another 9 catches for 90 yards and 11 targets. He is open on almost every play, it seems. Currently, the wide receiver 28 ADP right now is 55. It's slowly moved up, gone from 68 to 57, 57 again in October, and now 55. It's got to shoot up coming up here. Yeah. We're a little bit behind. We were talking about players that we were ahead on. There are 11 receivers directly in front of him in ADP, guys, that I would take Jaylen Waddle over easily. That includes Mike Williams, Mike Evans, Devonta Smith, Cortland Sutton, Chase Claypool, Michael Pittman, Jerry Jeudy, Amari Cooper, DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, and T. Higgins.
Well, we have caught up a little bit. As I said, that December ADP is in the works. According to that, Waddle is a mid-third rounder.
Okay, we're getting close.
Yeah, 30. I'm sorry, 29 is his ADP in this updated data, right behind Deontay Johnson, behind Terry McLaurin.
Exactly where I had him.
DJ Moore. Those are that's the new range of where his value is. And honestly, I think that's almost too low. I mentioned on Twitter last week that Jaylen Waddle is on that path. And I mentioned guys like Juju Smith-Schuster and DJ Moore and Chase Claypool.
Yeah.
Because what we saw with those guys, and I think for most of those three, I think this is the case, that we saw it in their rookie season. Back half of their rookie season, we see the flashes and their value explodes, and they end up either as a wide receiver 1 according to Dynasty ADP, or at least in Claypool's case, very close to it. Basically, we see a huge value spike. A lot of people took that as me kind of being negative towards Waddle. I'm not at all. I think he's on that path to gain that value to become a wide receiver 1 in Dynasty ADP. And for those three, Juju and Claypool especially, it didn't work out, or at least it hasn't yet. We saw a big drop in their value in subsequent months after that. You know, Waddle has a higher draft capital. He's locked in as the wide receiver 1, which is something we couldn't say for either Juju or Claypool at that time, and we still can't. We saw Devontae Parker come back in this game, and he was fine.
But it didn't matter.
Yeah, it didn't matter. He's no threat to Waddle. Waddle, 9 catches, 90 yards, 18 fantasy points, made it look easy.
And they truly have not unlocked him yet. He's not a deep threat yet. They're going to add that to his game. He's got so much speed. He's going to use that to get open, not just to run after the catch in the future, as we saw at Alabama so many times with those deep posts and those straight 9 routes where he just blew by defenders. That's coming down the road with Waddle.
I think that's a great point. And, you know, he almost reminds me of Antonio Gibson from last year.
Okay, I see that.
Gibson comes into the league. We know he's a great pass catcher. He's former college wide receiver. We just want to know, can he handle the running game? And Washington basically uses him as a traditional running back, doesn't give him that pass catcher role really. And that leads to even more confidence in Antonio Gibson's game. We already know he can do this, and now he's added this to it. Same thing with Waddle. As you said, he's the speed guy. He's the deep play threat. We know he can do that already. But now he's 5th in the league in targets. He's 2nd in the league in receptions.
Oh my goodness.
So now we know he can handle that volume as well. And he's going to do the same thing Antonio Gibson did. His value is going to explode. In fact, it's happening already.
You mentioned he's right behind Deontay Johnson. So that probably puts him in the 15, 16 range among wide receivers, right around there. I'm wondering, Ryan, fast forward 12 months, we'll hop in the Dynasty DeLorean and go into the future. Jaylen Waddle is the wide receiver blank, and his ADP is blank.
Well, currently the numbers that we've mentioned, mid-third round, behind Deontay Johnson, he's the wide receiver 15, Deontay Johnson 14, Terry McLaurin 13. I'll throw out as wide receiver 7, something like
There
that.
you go. I was going to say 6. Yeah. He's going to be up there. There's going to be, we're going to talk about Deontay Johnson here in a little while and the consistency and all those things. That's what we're already seeing with Waddle.
Yeah.
And like you said, he is locked in as a number 1 wide receiver, a huge option in that offense. He's going to be in the second round of ADP quicker than a hiccup. And he deserves it, to be honest.
Yep.
Anything to cover here with the Giants, right? Maybe Saquon Barkley, 11 for 55, caught 6 passes for just 19 yards. So he didn't kill anybody, but man, he doesn't really have it yet.
No, he doesn't. Well, actually, I think maybe he does. I think he's fully healthy. I think that's fine. But this Giants team has just been destroyed by injuries. Of course, Daniel Jones missed this one. We saw Mike Glennon. Kadarius Toney missed another game. Sterling Shepard missed another game. Kenny Golladay was active but got hurt during the game. This team is just cursed, and the lack of balance that has come as a result of that is obviously just hurting Barkley. I don't know if we're going to see his upside anytime soon.
Yeah, unfortunately, I agree with you, and I think you're right. If he's not fully healthy, he's very close. We see some cutbacks now that weren't happening earlier in his recovery. It looks a lot more nimble and quicker than he has in the past. So I think he's back, but man, that offensive line, they got some things to adjust up front there in New York. Speaking of New York and things that need adjusted, the Jets got hammered by the Eagles 33-18. I tweeted during this game that at one point there were 6 possessions in the game, 6 touchdowns, and somehow there was a field goal lead in the game. That's because the Jets couldn't kick an extra point. They were down 21-18 despite scoring 3 touchdowns. I know there was a 2-point conversion in there, but it just felt from the beginning that the Jets didn't have it. Philadelphia was going to run away with it. That's what they did. Dallas Goedert caught 6 passes for 105 yards and 2 first-half touchdowns. I hope you started him. He came off that awful game last week where he had 1 catch and no yards and 3 targets and was banged up and all that stuff. He had a big game and looked like the Dallas Goedert that we wanted him to be coming out of South Dakota State a couple of years ago.
Yeah, Goddard was an easy call once we heard the quarterback news. Really, I would have felt confident with any of the Eagles pass catchers. I know Devontae Smith did not get there, but we've been begging for Dallas Goedert to be freed or unlocked or whatever term you want to use, and that's had to do with Zach Ertz's presence for a long time, and then. Limitations of Jalen Hurts at the quarterback spot, but a gunslinger like Minshew, it was exciting to see what Goddard could do, and he delivered.
Speaking of Minshew, 242 yards and 2 touchdowns. They kind of coasted at the end of this game. It felt like he could have put up bigger numbers. They didn't really need it. They turned around and handed it to these running backs. Miles Sanders, 24 carries, 120 yards, got nicked up, but I saw the interview after the game. He was kind of jumping around in the background behind Dallas Goedert. Seems like he's probably going to be fine. 3 catches for 22 yards. That's such a Miles Sanders game, though. He looked dominant at times in this game, but doesn't score a touchdown in the game. Gets nicked up during the game. That's so Miles Sanders.
Yeah, career highs for him, both in rushing attempts with 24 and rushing yards with 120.
About time.
Yeah, this is what we've been waiting for. It took an injury to Jordan Howard. It took Boston Scott being under the weather, and he barely played in this game. It was basically Miles Sanders' backfield, and of course, obviously Hurts out of action took away some rush attempts that he would normally have. This was kind of the best case Miles Sanders game, and you're right, he still didn't score a touchdown. Caught just the 3 passes for limited yardage. So he's going to end up as kind of a fringe RB1, RB2 on the week. And if that's the best we can hope for, Ugh.
Yeah, it stinks when you need a touchdown, and that's kind of what we need. Philadelphia has, they have Washington, and they got to play the Giants yet, and they're we'll see what happens. I guess that backfield is murky every single week, and this is the least murky. And as you said, it still wasn't the blow up game that we expected. We should talk about Minshew quickly here, Ryan, because honestly, like, just watching from the pocket, delivering the football, getting the offense into what they want him to do. This was the best quarterback performance for an Eagles quarterback in at least a couple of months. I know Hurts had those huge games back in September where he was throwing for 300 yards and 2 touchdowns and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Minshew would have done that if they weren't playing the Jets. And I know a lot of dynasty managers and the Hurts apologists will say, well, it was the Jets, so of course Minshew could do it. But man, I really liked the way the Eagles looked on Sunday against New York.
Yeah, I did as well, and kind of joked about this on Twitter, and you and I talked about it prior to the game as well, that we almost expected, we did expect, of course, a solid game from Minshew against the Jets, and then perhaps some type of quarterback controversy, or at least some rumblings that maybe Minshew should see more action down the stretch. And I know that the coaching staff in Philadelphia has already said that's not the case. Hurts is their starter moving forward, but they haven't really instilled a lot of confidence or been very confident with their own decisions with Hurts or with that offense in general. So I don't know if this is the last we'll see of Minshew this season.
Completely agree. The football team went to Las Vegas and got a win, 17-15. Antonio Gibson did it. That was it. He got a shot. No J.D. McKissick, 23 carries for 88 yards. Also 5 catches for 23. A nice touchdown catch in the corner of the end zone on 6 targets. He's going to be an RB1 this week and deserves every bit of it. Logan Thomas also looked good in his return. 3 catches for 48 yards and a touchdown on 5 targets. But he got banged up once again. Of course, he had the hamstring injury that kept him out for so long. Returned last week, and now it's a knee. We'll see how serious it is. The Twitter doctors don't seem like it is, but John Bates came in and caught 3 passes for 42 yards after Logan Thomas went out. So maybe Bates gets another look here in the next couple of weeks. The whole story here in this game for me, Ryan, is Hunter Renfrow. He's the best receiver on that team. 9 catches, over 100 yards on 10 targets. He can get open on every play.
Yeah, remains underrated and undervalued in Dynasty and fantasy and in NFL circles, however you want to look at it. This guy is not getting the credit he deserves. Past 5 games, wide receiver 11. He threw a wide receiver 51 game in there just to keep us guessing. And then wide receiver 5, wide receiver 12. So that is 4 wide receiver 1, 4 top 12 games over the past 5 weeks. That is pending the last 2 games of the week. So may get pushed out of that top 12 for this week. But regardless, very impressive stretch for him. Of course, with Waller out, that only leads to more opportunity for Hunter Renfrow. But he's making the most of it. He's getting some end zone targets, which is not something we saw from him earlier in the season. Just riding a heater, and we're going to see his value change as well.
Yeah, it's going to go up for sure. He was a 3rd-round pick in rookie drafts a few years ago coming out of Clemson. Nobody really cared for him. In fact, I saw him on waiver wires throughout his rookie season, and now look at him. He's putting up wide receiver 2 numbers, it seems like, week in and week out. The Rams, they handled the Jaguars 37-7. Same old for the Rams, or at least a return to that. If you had them and you played them, you're happy. Cooper Kupp, 8 for 129 and a score. Matthew Stafford, 295 and 3 through the air. Van Jefferson even 6 for 41 and 1. Odell Beckham caught a touchdown. Tyler Higbee went 5 for 48. It was all good. And then there was Sony Michel. He fills in nicely for Darrell Henderson. 24 carries, 121 yards, and a touchdown. Also caught 3 passes. Sony Michel, it looks like to me, Ryan, if Henderson's missing, it's just fine pivoting over to Michel because he'll pick up the slack.
Yeah, it does. We spent all the season basically calling Henderson the Cam Akers, the guy that we wanted, and maybe it's more about this Rams offense and not
Yep.
not who's carrying the ball. I think this hurts Darrell Henderson, not necessarily from a production standpoint moving forward. If he's healthy, I still think he's the guy. But it does make me think we've been giving him a little too much credit this season.
Henderson's clearly banged up. That's why he missed the game. That affects his production over the last month as well. But this is going to be Cam Akers when he gets back. All those videos online, they're pretty impressive. So looking forward to seeing him run the rock for the Rams next season. The Steelers down the Ravens 20-19. Deontay Johnson 8 for 105 and 2 scores. The touchdowns are nice to see from Deontay. A lot of times he puts up those catches, doesn't get into the end zone, does it twice on Sunday. Looked really good. And as we mentioned earlier in the show, Ryan, so consistent.
I think it was about a month ago when I came on this show, and I don't know what I was thinking that day, but I bashed Deontay Johnson. I said he was
whoops.
Yeah. Whoops. I said he was a player to sell. I said he lacked upside. And I don't know, maybe Deontay Johnson listens to this show because he has, that must be it. He has shown that upside over the past month. Wide receiver 4, wide receiver 11, wide receiver 2 in this one. And what I pointed out a month ago was that while Deontay Johnson had been so consistent, so solid, he had scored double-digit fantasy points in every game. What he hadn't done is really show off that upside. At that point, he had one game as a top 15 wide receiver. Well, now just a few weeks later, he has 4 games as the top 15 wide receiver, including these 3 in a row. So even with Juju out, Claypool's been fine, but he hasn't necessarily taken advantage or stepped up with that increased role. It's just the Deontay Johnson show.
Yeah, Deontay Johnson is always open too. So it feels to me like, all the Ben stuff that happened over the last week and it all leaking out that he's probably done with the Steelers. No duh. He might be Deontay. I'm talking about. He might be quarterback proof, at least to some extent. We'll see what happens there in Pittsburgh under center. But it feels to me like with him getting open regularly, he's going to have production no matter who's throwing him the football. Najee Harris, he was good. He went over 100 yards in total yards from scrimmage, had the 5 catches, so he was fine. For the Ravens, they should have won the game, first of all. Mark Andrews, I don't know, he's slowed down on that 2-point conversion, and that was a good throw from Lamar, and I think he's getting a lot of hate for it, but that was on Andrews, if you ask me. Speaking of Lamar, 253 and a touchdown, ran for 55. It should have been better, and Lamar's kind of he's kind of cooled off over the last few games.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily show up in the box score. Still running, still productive, but kind of like you mentioned with Zeke, just not passing the eye test in recent weeks. I think of course we still have to start him in our fantasy matchups, and as I said, he's been fine, but not that upside that we've grown accustomed to from him.
Ryan, I think Devonta Freeman's doing some P90X or something. He's worked out. He looks so much better than he has for the last 5 years. I cannot believe it. 14 carries for 52 yards. That sounds like ho-hum. But if you watch the game, he looked pretty darn good against a tough Steelers defense. Mm-hmm. Also 5 catches for 45 yards. I totally missed out. I call myself a pretty good Dynasty player. I look at the waiver wire. I see the transactions. I saw Devonta Freeman's name. I saw him land in Baltimore. I said, no. Even in a good rushing offense, I don't need any of that. And I regret it. He's looked good.
Yeah, he's been very good. We looked at the other guys that they were signing, bringing in at that point.
I didn't want any of them either, to be fair. But I can't believe it's him that took the step forward.
Yeah, he's definitely taken advantage of that situation. I mean, Latavius Murray is back and healthy now and has been for the past
He's
2 or
also
3
a
weeks.
backup.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter. We thought Latavius might be the guy to grab and really be a difference maker there. It's somehow Devontae Freeman.
It's somehow Freeman, and he's passing that eye test. The last game we should talk about here is the Seahawks. They beat the 49ers 30-23. Kind of a surprise there. Honestly, that crowd in Seattle was crazy on Sunday afternoon, though. Russell Wilson, 231-2. Still missing throws. DK Metcalf was open on a deep one, just threw it out of bounds. That was disappointing. Metcalf goes 5 for 60. Tyler Lockett, 7 for 68 and a touchdown. I don't know if there's a lot to talk about here. Maybe Dwayne Eskridge. He looked good on a couple of those catches underneath, turned it into 3 for 35 and a touchdown. I'm probably going to be writing about him in the rookie report card. For the 49ers, though, Ryan, that offense does not look the same without Deebo Samuel.
No, and we've talked about it, and everyone's talked about it, that he is, even with George Kittle, even with a focus on the running game, even with Trey Lance seemingly waiting in the wings, this offense is all about Deebo Samuel. And with him out of the lineup in this one, it did not look the same. They struggled. Kittle was very good. Ayuk, I thought, was a little disappointing. Elijah Mitchell was a little disappointing, gets banged up again. Came back into the game. I didn't think he should have. He should have. I know he was evaluated.
I didn't expect him to.
I did not expect him to. Yeah, let's say that. No medical expert here, but he got hit on the head pretty hard and was back in as the game was on the line. So
it was violent, and I thought, well, we won't see him for the rest of the game. We'll see what happens after the game. And then when I saw him on the field, I thought I was mistaken. He ends up going 22 for 66, but scores a touchdown, catches 3 for 18 as well. For the rest of the 49ers, Ayuk, you mentioned disappointing, 3 for 55. Thought he was going to have that opportunity. Maybe the Seahawks did as well. They were shutting him down. That left George Kittle open 9 for 181 and 2 touchdowns. Man, he skirted the sideline a couple times. He looked good. It looked like that top 1, 2, 3 tight end that we've been looking for all year long. Last thing I wanted to talk about with the 49ers here, the news kind of circulated this week. Once again, Garoppolo's probably going to get traded in the offseason. We wonder what his value is. At least the talking heads did on talk shows and such, what they can get for Garoppolo. I'm wondering how dynasty managers are looking at Garoppolo right now. This is probably only for super flex leagues. He's seen as a back end quarterback too for most, 299 yards and 2 touchdowns. Another nice game. He's adding to his overall value, but I don't know if that's going to transfer to dynasty, Ryan.
I don't really think so. He's had a decent stretch. Definitely been better the past 5 or 6 weeks than he was to start the season, with a couple of QB1 games mixed in there. But yeah, I think at this point we just don't see that upside. I guess you could say maybe that changes with a different team, a different coaching staff. But I mean, San Francisco and look at the weapons they have on offense and that the success of that coaching staff historically. That's one of those spots you want your quarterback to be.
Right.
And if these are the numbers he's putting up, I don't know that he's going to be any better off if it's Denver or Houston or Carolina or wherever he ultimately lands.
I have a sneaky suspicion that fantasy managers are going to be surprised at what the 49ers get in return for Jimmy Garoppolo in the offseason. He's going to bring a draft pick that people say, "Whoa, really?" Maybe I'm wrong on that.
No, I think you're probably right, because the fantasy production is not there. But I mean, Garoppolo, say what you will about quarterback wins as a stat, but Garoppolo has been successful for the most part in San Francisco, and obviously decision makers around the league value that. We're also looking at a weak incoming rookie quarterback class. So if there's a team that is either not in line to get the rookie quarterback that they desire because of where their draft pick is, or if they just don't like any of those rookie quarterbacks, flip that late first rounder, flip that early second rounder for Garoppolo and go from there. I think you're right. I wouldn't be surprised if they get a first rounder for him.
So that does it for this episode of the DLF Dynasty podcast. It's the last week of NFL buys next week. The fantasy playoffs are right around the corner. We're going to welcome Matt back to the pod next week. At least as of now, we are. For Ryan, I'm Dan. Thanks for listening to the DLF Dynasty podcast. We'll catch you again next week.